So Nikhil, thank you again. We meet, I guess, right? I think last time when we met was the 5-day course, I guess, yes or no? The 5-day bridge course. So it's late evening. It's late evening for us in India, those who are joining from India, and it might be good morning, good evening, good afternoon, right? It can be mid for those who are joining from the other parts of this world. So once again, we welcome everyone. So I think how many participants? So as of now, today we are having some 200 plus people who are joining us this moment of time. So first of all, thanks to Nikhil again for having me back. So Nikhil, Chata, and the other team members of PA. So we have been having this, what to say, a very close relationship in a way, a very close friendship in a way for a very long time. So in a way, oh, yes. So right. Anyway, so my apologies again. So I welcome everyone who has joined us from all the sphere of this globe, from all the nations. So especially the people who are having a keen interest in this oil and gas industry. So I have been checking on the chat. So when there was a Q&A session, the initial Q&A session between Nikhil and you all, so many of them had shared their concerns, like whether it will be a beneficial one for those who are not from the oil and gas backgrounds. So this is a very genuine question. This is a very genuine query for everyone. So obviously, it will be benefited because the main approach or the main purpose of conducting this session, that is this 45 days long session, is to acclimatize you all. So those who are from the non-oil and gas background, even though those people can acclimatize themselves or adapt themselves to the oil and gas practices. So that's why the title itself has been kept as oil and gas practices. So that was a specific reason. So Nikhil asked me, like, you decide on a topic. So that is the reason why I decided to keep this topic, actually, oil and gas industrial practices. So it might be a benefit for those who have already studied the academics, those who have already got the concepts of oil and gas industry in their curriculum. But definitely it will be a pathfinder in a way. It will be an eye opener for those who are from the non-oil and gas background and who wants to pursue or who wants to find a certain sets of opportunities in the oil and gas business or in the oil and gas industries. So this was the sole reason. So definitely, it will be a session. To be very frank, to be very honest, this is my assurance that this session at the end, towards the 45th or towards the 40th or 41st day, maybe you will be able to tell yourself. That means being from a non-oil and gas business, definitely this sessions might have in a way benefited you. So this is what we have in our mind. So the things, the discussions, whatever you shall be finding in these slides, whatever we'll be discussing from today onwards till the 45th day. So definitely those things or those concepts or those materials will definitely help you to understand. And it has been kept simple, it has been kept fundamental so that it is understood by everyone. So that was my take in this internship session. So this is what, and I believe that having the simplicity is the best way to learn the things. Definitely we have to go through lot many complexities later on, lot many technical complexities does comes up, but to build up the foundation, to build up the base, obviously we have to go to the level of simplicity. But then again, as the going gets tough, the tough gets going. So this is what you have, the famous English, right? So, Nikhil has he has appraised you of all the course content. So, I think this is in a way, and what to say, an unnecessary part of this slide that has come up. So, this is what we shall be discussing apart from the software exposure. So, I saw someone asking about what particular softwares you might be taught. So, it won't means we can't like tell you right now what particular softwares can be given exposure to, right? What kind of software sessions can be conducted, but definitely we do have lot many softwares. So you might be following PEA from a long time, so you have seen them. You have seen them conducting sessions of petrol, sessions of pipes in. Recently, I guess they have concluded the pipes in sessions. Then apart from that, I guess many other softwares, if I'm not wrong. So we do have softwares. So I do personally have exposures, have hands-on experience on lot many softwares. But then again, so in the due course of time, by the sets of responses we get from the participants, it will be very powerful. Definitely, we have to take everyone in the same page. We have to take everyone in the same boat, right? So based on that, we will be planning on the software sessions. But then again, you shouldn't be thinking in such a way that means the softwares won't be taught, or maybe the exposures won't be given, right? So we shall cater to the best of your needs, so that your entire 45 days of your involvement in this internship turns out to be fruitful. So this shall be the domains of discussions overall, along with the softwares, right? So this has been already discussed by Nikhil. So I won't be stressing on this again. And like Nikhil said, that means there might be some regular, or there might be some timely assessments based on which there might be certain perks of this sessions, right? So we'll be straight away jumping to the first module, which is the introduction to the petroleum industry and the hydrocarbon exploration practices. So in this module, what we shall try to find out, or what we'll be able to figure out, is like what actually is the petroleum industry. Because many people, I'll just give the typical example of India itself. So if suppose you say that, if suppose a person, let's say his name is ABC, right? So if suppose he says, or he ends up disclosing the fact that he's studying petroleum engineering. So the first thing that comes out, or the first thing the person will reply is, okay, fine, you're studying petroleum engineering. Definitely you'll be getting a job in the Middle East tomorrow. Tomorrow as in just after day, right? So at times we do need to change the perspectives, right? People do say that means, okay, fine, you're studying oil and gas, or you're studying petroleum engineering, but what is the use of it? Because petroleum is coming down, the prices are going up, the production is going down. So I think this is in a way a baseless domain that we have taken up, right? So we need to change those perspectives, right? And in order to change such kind of perspectives, we have to simplify it to them, right? Like a recent blowout incident had occurred in the northeastern part of India. So we have to make the society, we have to make the surrounding communities aware. Like what were the operations that might have led to such kind of blowout incidents? Or what sets of operations are involved in the field, which might be at times a hazardous one. Yes. Now the same goes out to the each and every nation wheresoever we are having the oil and gas industry, right? At times there are also certain complications, there are certain confusion as well when people start, I won't say mixing up, but I'll say that people start sandwiching the concepts of chemical and petroleum as a single one, right? So there are a lot many conspiracies, there are a lot many discussions, yes, and there are a lot many backbiting as well. When people say that means some part is not a part of the oil and gas industry, or like some domain claims to be, or claims to be the sole authority of the oil and gas industry, right? So there are a lot many controversies going on. So our job is to understand it as a whole. Our job is to understand it neutrally. To be very specific, our job is to understand it in such a way that we have the neutral approach of understanding the things, and also bringing it out to the common public, right? So that's all. And this also deals with the business as well. Means we are talking about the managerial skills as well. Yes, we are also talking about the geopolitical, or the political, or the bureaucracy here. So we do know, means we might have seen lot many movies that involves the intervention of some superpowers in some developing nations. In some movies, we do see the theme that is directly related to the oil and gas industry itself. So why do those movies are being portrayed, or why are such conditions portrayed? Those things people never understand, because still today, yet till now, we are not able to reach out to them. So I hope that means by the end of the 45th or 44th day of this internship, you are able to understand, you are able to realize what actually is the oil and gas industry, or what actually is someone having a life in this oil and gas industry, or how actually oil and gas industry can help to build up a better future, maybe. Because in that, again, in the environment perspectives, again, you are having lot many complications, you are having lot many controversies again. So all sorts of things, all sorts of things. So it's a multidimensional aspects that you have to look into. Yes, so that's what. So this is what our plan is, right? So maybe this might be in a way an out of the box approach that we are bringing up, because normally what happens is in the internships, it comes up to be an industrial internship, whereby we had the physical interaction with the industry people, or we used to go to the field, or we used to have the certain access to certain data, right? But since you know that for the past 2 years we have been crippling, we have been handicapped, we have been paralyzed by the ongoing COVID situations. So we have to obviously make the best use of these resources. So right now, virtual is the only way. Virtual will be the way to understand things, to portray or to perceive certain situations. So with this, I'll just start. So my introduction has been given by Nikhil already. So I won't reiterate it, but I'll just say my name. So if for someone the name seems to be tough to speak out or to pronounce. So my name is Adityam Datta. Right? So I happen to be an assistant professor from Lovely Professional University, and I have been teaching for the past roughly around like 2 years or so. And I have been closely associated with Petroleum Engineers Association. And in the past, I have got the opportunity to interact with many of the people or many of the participants, out of which many of you might be the same faces, might be the same people whom we might have met for this n number of times, right? And for others, this might be the first time that we are interacting. Okay. So, so few slides by the again. I'll be giving a disclaimer by the way. So few days back we had a 5 days bridge course. So in that 5 days bridge course, we might have come across some similar pictures, some similar quotes, some similar taglines. So my humble request to those people who might have come across or who might recall that this particular picture, this that particular slide is from that bridge course itself, right? So don't get me wrong, because we are starting fresh, right? So because there might be many new participants will be joining, but then again, this is not a bridge course. This is just that in certain cases, in certain conditions, we do have to bring up certain images or certain relations which might be, which might be relevant, which might be acquainted to you way back, right? So when it comes to oil and gas industry, it's not only that the geoscience people, that is the geology and the geophysics people will be the boss. It's not that the drilling engineering people will be the boss or the drillers will be the boss. It's not those who have studied petroleum engineering, including drilling engineering, reservoir engineering, production engineering, then specific well test operations. Yes, so it's not like that. So we do have a very good contribution from the other domains as well. Like say chemical engineering, for the chemical formulations of various fluids that we need to interact, that we need to inject into the formation for the enhancement of oil. We do have chemists. Yes, so those who have graduated from the chemistry background, they do have a very good opportunity in the oil and gas industry, because chemists, they are well related with the drilling engineering or the drilling operations. We have people from the physics background, we have people from the electronics background, electrical background, right? So we also have people from the law as well. So it's completely a non-technical background by the way. Yes, someone from the MBA background. Yes, so we do have lot many people, lot many domains which are contributing towards the success, contributing towards the success or the 24/7 operations of the oil and gas industry. Yes, so someone might be sitting in his cabin, in her cabin, having the air conditioned rooms, having a very good workstation in front of them. Some might be working the whole day in the field, handling equipments. Yes, where not many physical activities are involved, right? So the operations or the domains or the responsibilities are different, but altogether we are contributing towards the success of this oil and gas industry. Sorry, right? So this is what. So we do have to have the multidisciplinary team approach in this case. We also have the civil engineers, the mechanical engineers, right? So all these people, all this domain together, what they form is the multidisciplinary team approach. It's just like the football team we have. We have the strikers, we have the wingers, we have the midfield, we have the defensive midfield, we have the attacking midfields. So based upon the strategy, by the way, we have the defense, then we have the keepers, we have the sweeper keepers at times, right? So all together they help in winning the team, right? So in the team should win, right? So that is what. So collective efforts is what they will be getting after at the end of the 90 minutes. So similarly, collective efforts in the oil and gas industry will be giving us fruit. And by the term fruit, I mean to say oil and gas, right? And also lowering down the occurrences of certain occupational hazards. So many students or many participants might be still having that query that, okay, fine, means I have said that means it will be a multidisciplinary team approach. Okay, fine. But how do you see yourself in the oil and gas industry? Still, that question might be lingering in your mind. So don't worry. We will definitely answer that, right? We'll definitely answer that. And also, what we'll do is means maybe at certain point of time, you will be getting the answer by yourself. So while we are in this flow of discussion, definitely you'll be getting the answers, right? So before we step foot into this entire oil and gas industry operations, I'll just start with the basics, like means how do the oil and gas operation starts? So if suppose you have this entire piece of land, so you might be seeing that there might be certain equipment, there might be certain machines that are being put up, that have been erected, or that are still under construction or in the assembly phase, right? So what happens actually? So we won't be discussing about the entire operations. We'll be just discussing about the certain activities that leads to the settlement of certain equipments or settlement of certain operational setups there. So we have a block here. You have a block here. So this block can be anywhere, but obviously this block has to be somewhere where you have oil and gas. So you do know, maybe from the nation or from the country or from the part of the world, from whichever part of the world you're coming from, you do know what your nation has or what is our nation's capability in terms of oil and gas resources, right? So definitely, if suppose a certain nation is having a certain block, right, or a certain area where they feel that they will be having a certain accumulation, or they are means hopeful enough, that means there might be presence of hydrocarbons there. So what happens is they call out the companies, or what they do is first and foremost they go ahead with the surveying operations. So by surveying operations, what they try to do is they try to find oil and gas, right? Means they try to find indications whether the survey operations will indicate any possibilities of hydrocarbon accumulations or presence of hydrocarbons. What they do is after they have got some indication, all right. Now this is just an indication, by the way, so keep that in mind. So this is just an indication that they might be having with them, right? Since what happens is it's an indirect measurement that you are dealing with. Now, why it is an indirect measurement? Because it's not that means you put certain values in your calculator and then you just add it up or you just multiply and then you get the answer. In case of oil and gas industry, what happens is we send in something, right? And then the output which you get, based on this output, we try to understand. We try to understand what actually is the scenario or what probably the scenario might be. This is what happens. And that is why we call it as an indirect measurement, right? So now once we agree, that means up in this particular place, there will be or there is an indication of oil and gas, right? So now what will happen is we'll be opening up bids. Yes, we will be inviting companies. Companies say suppose Schlumberger. So companies say suppose Halliburton. Yes, Shell maybe. Yes, Shell. Then Total Oil. So I'm calling out the big shots in this way. All right. So that means this companies definitely they are common. They are the international oil companies. So that's why they might be means their names might be well acquainted in your nation. So that's why I'm calling out this particular company's names, right? So after the government or after that particular nation floats out the bids. All right. So what happens is these companies, they'll be looking into the data, right? So data, whatever has been obtained from the survey operations, which was mainly for finding oil and gas indications. All right. And then what they will see is they will be looking for the feasibility in this entire block, right? In this entire block. Now, the government, what these companies will do is they will be, in a way, they will be providing their quotes. Quotes as in like they will be giving their proposals, right? Proposal as in means for this entire block. If suppose the data which they have got from the government and it is indicating certain X barrels of oil or say suppose X feet cube of natural gas, yes, then depending upon their sets of operations, depending upon their requirements, depending upon their investments, they will be able to pay the government certain taxes, certain royalties, right? And from this X barrels, they will be able to recover, they will be able to pump out certain volumes of oil or certain volumes of gases, right? So say if suppose it's 1,000 barrels of target which the company has set into their minds, right? So definitely there has to be some say suppose 2,000 barrels of oil which has to be in place. But this again is just an indirect understanding that they have in mind, right? Now, after a certain company wins the bid, right? So that company will be awarded the contract or the lease will be given to that particular company. Now, when that particular lease is given to that company, now what will do? Now, what will happen is that particular company will start exploring each and every part, it means every nook and corner of this block. Right? So obviously at the very first time, the company is in this belief that means this entire block might be filled up with oil. We don't know till now. So what they will do is they will be drilling a first well here, which we call it as the exploratory well or the wildcat well. Right? Now based on this, based on drilling this particular wildcat well, what will happen is they will be able to understand. That means while drilling a well in this particular place, whereby or means whether there are any fluids nearby to this particular well. Yes. And finally, based upon drilling some more number of exploratory wells, what they have come to a conclusion is that means only this part of this block, or it's only this part of this block might be having a certain accumulations or certain volume of oil and gas. Whereas the entire part, the other part is completely useless. So I'm just trying to use the simplified forms or the layman forms, or so that everyone is able to understand. All right. So the black part is completely useless. So that means there are no indications of oil or gas. So if this is the case, then what will happen is the company they will be giving up this part of the block. All right. So that is called as the relinquishment. Because at first what it was believed that means the entire oil will be existing in this entire block, right? And based on that those taxations or those royalty or those agreements were signed, right? But after the company finds out or after the both the parties, that means the one who has awarded the lease and the one who has been awarded with the lease. So since now both the parties understand or both the companies understand or both the sides understand, now there might be certain changes to the existing deal, right? Obviously because the company has invested certain amount of money to explore to find out, that means out of this entire part of this block only this much is having or this much is a potential area, right? So those things happen, and then what happens is after a particular part of that block has been established, means established in terms of that it is for sure that you are having oil and gas, then we begin with the life cycle of the oil and gas fields. All right. So we start with the conventional or the classical operations of the oil and gas industry. That means starting with the exploration phase, that is the extensive exploration phase. Then comes the production phase. So in the exploration phase itself, you have the drilling operations as well, right? So the drilling operations as well. So in the production phase, what we have is we have the recovery of the oil and gas. And from this, what happens is there is the sale of these commodities. There is the sale of this crude oil and natural gas to the interested parties, based on which the revenues are being generated, right? And finally, what happens is after a certain stretch of time, then what we do is we go towards the abandonment phase. I hope the letters are clear to you, everyone. So that means if it is not clear, then definitely I'll be writing it in a much more better way. But still, right? Okay. Then now this is the typical life cycle of this entire oil and gas field. All right. So it's all starts with the exploration, whereby we look for or we search for the oil and gas deposits. Yes. And then what we do is after we have established, just like I said, that means from a given block, only we have established, that means only this part will be having a certain accumulation or a certain volume of oil and gas. Now what we'll do is we'll try to quantify. We'll try to quantify how much or what is the volume of oil or what is the volume of gas that is existing. So that particular phase, what we call it as the appraisal phase, right? We try to evaluate, we try to find out the valuation of this entire block, because definitely there will be certain investments after which there will be certain revenues. Yes. So the amount of investment which a company is putting in, that should definitely be adjusted, that should be definitely be repaid with the revenues that the company will be getting, right, or the returns that the company will be getting. So for that particular reason, there has to be appraisal, there has to be a valuation. Just like we go for the valuation of a certain company. Say suppose Tesla today. Tesla today is a very, what to say, it's a highly valuable company, right? So definitely, so the value of Tesla is very high. Right? So that's what they have done. Means the auditors, what they do is they investigate, they look out, that means what exactly or for how long means they will be able to produce the oil and gas, right? And then finally what they do is after the appraisal phase is done, then what they involve themselves with is they involve themselves with the development phase, where they start drilling some n number of wells. Now why I'm saying n number of wells, because this is not fixed, because that will depend, again, that will depend what are the field conditions. Yes, for how long there is a possibility that the field will be producing. Yes, so this all complication arises. Right? So after those wells are drilled, then definitely we shift towards the production phase, whereby we start extracting or pumping out the oil and gas. Finally, as the production commences, then what happens is there is this pressure depletion, and based on this pressure depletion, we have our production, and gradually what happens is even the production also starts depleting, and there comes a certain point, that is the abandonment phase, beyond which no matter how hard we try, no matter how much amount of investments we still put in, the oil is not going to come out. So it is at that period of time what we do is we start surrendering our operations, we start giving up the well. So that's it. So this is the overall gist of the oil and gas life cycle. All right. So that's what we'll do. That's what we'll do. That's what we'll try to understand in this entire 45 days of time. Right? So, but for this again, lot many complications comes up. All right. So lot many activities are involved. So it's not that simple as we see it now. Right? So this is what we're going to understand. So you see, that means if we talk about the evaluation, definitely investment is the prima facie in this, right? And in this, obviously the finance department or those people who are very good with business, who are very good with numbers, with accounts, or with the market, so they are the expertise in it, right? And after they have understood, means after they are well satisfied, that means definitely this field is an asset for them. Asset, yes, not a liability. So then what they do is they start developing the field. All right, so that means they start drilling the number of wells, and for then again you see that lot many activities are involved, like we have to design the entire operational site, right? So because you'll be given a particular plot, you'll be given a particular land, and from this particular land what will happen is you have to design the best possible, or you have to make use of the space available, based on which you will be procuring procurement the items, you will be setting up the sites, you'll be constructing it, right? And then what you'll be doing is you'll be installing all the equipments which will be contributing towards the oil and gas production. Yes, and in the due course of production, definitely we have the operation and the maintenance there. So just like we have our car, right? So after some time, after a certain period of time, what happens is we need to go some necessary checks. We need to go for some regular servicing of our vehicles. And finally, what happens is we go ahead with the abandonment, where decommissioning activities involved. Yes. So all these things is of a concern. It indeed has a very high value, the oil and gas market. Why? Because if you just consider, if you just add up natural gas and the contribution of petroleum, yes, then you will be able to see that altogether how well or what is the share that this conventional energy source is contributing towards the development or towards the rapid industrialization that we see today. And you can see in various sets, in various forms, they are contributing their fuel, they are contributing themselves, be it in terms of electricity generation in certain aspects, be it in terms of transportation or industrial developments, or for some commercial usage, or for some residential usage. So this petroleum and natural gas is indeed contributing to a larger extent. And when it comes to the contribution and inclusion of coal, then definitely you can well see, if you just remove this and this, if you just add up the other sources of energy, then you can see it's a minimal approach, it's a minimal contribution that the newly developed energies are doing, right? But then again, there has to be debates, there has to be certain, what to say, not a propaganda in a way, but there has to be certain ongoing discussions, certain evergreen debates. That means the environment is at risk, the world is at risk, yes. But then again, everyone shouts, but when it comes to implementation, no one comes forward, right? But then again, each and every time, whatever happens, whenever it happens, it is the oil and gas industry that is to be blamed, not anyone else. But then again, the day oil and gas industry just stops for one day to produce or to supply oil and gas, then definitely all the major oil countries, yes, all the developed nations, like say suppose USA, Russia, China, France, then UK. So just think about their navies, just think about their air force or their armies, their bulky machines or their huge machines. They will all just stop. So that's it. So it's a hypocrisy that is going on in a way, but it's very, it's very wrong to, what to say, it's very wrong to say in that way that it's a hypocrisy that is going on, but actually that's the fact. So at the UN conventions, at the US summits, the UN summits, all the nations, what they do is pledge. They pledge for environment protection. They pledge for bringing down the carbon emission. They pledge for the bringing down the uses of the oil and gas resources. But then again, we don't have any solar power. We don't have any electric powered vessels, or like the super carriers or the bombers, right? The bomber aircrafts. We don't have the jet fighters who are just working on the solar energy. But yes, definitely, if tomorrow if a jet fighter is developed and which is running purely based on the solar energy, then definitely it's very good thing. Everyone will be everyone will be appreciating that. But that's not the case. We can see very well. Yes. So that's it. So lot many complications, lot many controversies, and lot many hypocrisy has shaped up, has come up actually. But then again, it will always be the oil and gas industry that will be mobilizing the world, right? Be it from the upstream end or be it from the downstream end, that is the refineries. So definitely, upstream sector will be recovering the oil and gas, that is in its crude form, yes. And the downstream sector, which is the refining and the marketing sector, what they will do is they will be refining into some processed goods, into the processed fractions like gasoline, diesel, and the other forms of fuels, and then it will be put out into the market. So if you talk about the global oil producers, we know very well that means out of certain nations, because we have lot many countries who are having certain deposits of crude oil and natural gas. But out of this, we do know that means there are few nations or there are few candidates which are having the best share of the oil and gas reserves. One is the Venezuelan nation. Then, if we talk about the most of the Middle Eastern countries, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, then we talk about Kuwait, right? So these nations as a whole, then if we talk about Algeria, if we talk about Nigeria, so this particular nations, if we talk about Libya as well, so these nations are indeed having a very good resources. It's having a very good number of oil and gas. But then again, had it been that the humans are very peaceful and very gentle in their mindsets, then definitely the world would have been very peaceful by now. But definitely, if we talk about Venezuela, the first thing that comes to our mind is it's a failed state. It has failed. Whenever we see the name Iraq somewhere, again the same thing comes up. Libya, yes. Then whenever it comes to Iran, it's still going on. Kuwait even, yes. So that's what. But then again, we are all relying. The entire world is relying on this failed state, the so-called failed states, the so-called failed states. This is how I'd like to term them, right? So these are all human interventions which has led to the disturbances, by the way. Yes. So you see, that's what means. No matter how hard you try to hate oil and gas emissions, but it is different because you know why? Oil gas is strategic. Crude oil, especially, it's strategic. Why? Because you see, all the modern economies they require oil. Just like I discussed a few moments back. The modern militaries. So nowadays we have a huge fleet of the U.S. Navy rolling. Means they are just moving in and around the Pacific, moving in and around the Atlantic Ocean, and even in the Indian Ocean, just like the way the Chinese are doing or the Russians are doing. Yes, so they all require oil to move their machines, or else all their vessels will be stuck in the mid ocean. They won't be able to go anywhere. Obviously, because they are not boats that will be having any sorts of sails that might be carrying them with the help of the wind, right? So that's what. But then again, very in a very sweet way, what happens is the states, that is the nations, they intervene or they love intervening in dealing with the oil, because when there's a price volatility that is coming up, yes, so that price volatility, it creates distrust of the markets. So people start having a loss in they start losing faith in the oil and gas market, or they start losing faith in the oil and gas companies. And then these people, the bureaucrats, they start coming up with certain solutions. Yes, but again, these solutions are very much centric towards their own benefits. So this is something which you should keep in mind. So you see that out of all, so far, still, even though US is at the forefront, yes, of everything, US is at the forefront of everything you see, means be it the climate change, be it the various sorts of accords or the pacts or the protocols of UN that they are signing, or that they are taking initiatives. But then again, you see, this is what US is consuming. If you consider the other nations, definitely China, it does have certain sense, why? Because it is still having that developing tag, right? And same goes with India as well. But then again, there's a huge contrast between the consumption or between the utilization of China and that of India. Almost threefold it is increasing, right? And then we have the other nations. So that's what it means. We are setting up examples, but when it comes to implementation, we try to back up, right? So this is indeed a recent development actually. You know that both the nations has the new elects. Yes, US has the new president. Even Iran also has the new president. Just few days back they had the elections. Yes, but then again, you know that what Iran has went through. There are certain plans, or there are certain operations which has thwarted or which has halted their nuclear plans. Yes, and there were certain sanctions that were means imposed on Iran. So you see that means just after the democratic government has come up in the US, some thousands US sanctions has been agreed to be lifted, but then again 500 are yet to be lifted. So 1500 sanctions. So that's not a joke to talk about. You see. So that means no nation, or there are certain limitations, or there are certain restrictions by which a nation is prohibited from interacting with Iran. Yes. Why? Because Iran is one potential player in the oil and gas market, which is having lot many oil and gas reserves. But then again, the world politics, what they do is they want to cripple it, so that they come begging, so that they lend a hand, so that they start opening their doors for the outsiders to come in. Yes, that's what. So it was all expected that the newly elected president of Iran will be having a discussion with the newly elected president of the United States. But then again, the obvious happened. When the new president, he refused to meet Joe Biden. So that's what means there's still tensions going on, and this has added the fuel to the fire, right? So if you talk about the global oil demand, right? So this is a very old data I'm taking, but this definitely it makes sense actually. You see, this actually makes sense there, right? So you see that means what it has projecting is that means the overall oil consumption in the demand will be increasing no matter how hard or how means for how many days we shout that bring down the oil consumption, bring down the uses of crude oil and natural gas and coal. Yes, because the energy which we are getting from this oil and gas resources, definitely we won't be getting it from other sources. So that is a true fact. And you see that means while comparing to the consumption or to the trends of the developed or the industrialized nations and to the developing nations, then we see that it's contrast. While on the one hand, you can see that the developed nations have started to capitalize on their consumptions, capitalize on the utilization. Whereas you see definitely, just like the industrialized and the developed nations, they were obviously once developing nations. So they also had the same habits, the same practices to move ahead or to attain certain advancements. So similarly, the developing nations like China is there, India is there, right? Japan is there, and lot many other nations are there, like Brazil is there. Yes, so all these nations, so they are using their fuel resources, especially the crude oil and natural gas, to the best of their abilities, and that's why you see that means it is alarmingly it is increasing. And this purple trend which you see, this is of the former Soviet Union, by the way. All right, so Soviet Union which broke up, so it is considering all the nations of the Soviet Union, right? So that's what you see. And the major share of the oil consumption is in the developing nations, and that too in the Asian continent. Right. So you do know. So when we talk about Asia, then definitely there are certain names, there are certain two, three names which straight away comes. Yes. So one being China, one being India, the other one being Pakistan, Japan, Korea. Yes. But then again, China, India, Pakistan, so they are at the top of discussions nowadays. So they are trending, just like the hashtags are being trending in Twitter, so we can see which particular hashtag is trending. Similarly, whenever it comes to the discussions or the topics of Asia, so China, India, and Pakistan, so they are always the trending topics. And that is being followed by North America, because USA is influencing the entire North America in a way, right? That's what. So the global consumption again means no one can stop it. So that's the problem. And if you see that per person, what is the consumption, that is the barrels per person, then we can see that in case of this, then developing nations definitely they're having a very low percentage, a very low representation in this case. Why? Because had it been in such a way, that means the consumption is very much equal, it's very much healthy among all the persons, that is the per capita consumption we're talking about in this case, then definitely if this goal was achieved, then definitely this developing nations today would have become the developed nations, right? So that's why. So in case of the developing nations, the per capita consumption is less. Why? Because only certain sectors are being targeted, only certain sectors are being used, or they are given the preferences. Like say suppose agriculture, the preference is very low. Why? Because nations are mostly working on their defenses maybe. So definitely, so in terms of the funds allocation. So defenses will be having a better fund allocation in comparison to the agriculture. But we know that agriculture is much more in need, all right, because we do need crops, we do need the food items that needs to be delivered to each and every person. But then again, every country has their own priorities when it comes to its own image. Yes, so means that's what means people will die out of poverty, people will die out of hunger, but still they won't be diverting the allocations towards the food sector, towards the agriculture sector. And that's why we see means there is almost a very pathetic situation in the African nations. Not in all nations, but definitely in few of the nations, we do have certain, what to say, a very sorrow state, a very pity state we have. Now, if you have to compare between the sectors, means one sector is the transportation. Yes, now this transportation is where most of the fuel is being used up. Yes, and in this case, if you see, then definitely mm, in the developed nations, definitely it will be more in the transportation sector, right? Because now they are able to harness the wind energy very well. They are able to harness the solar energy very well. Yes, but in the developing nations, the harnessing of solar energy help them to boost up their industrial production. So definitely they will be in need of the conventional fuel sources like coal, like oil or natural gas. Right? So in the developing nations, both the cases or both the sectors, be it the transportation sector, be it the other sectors like the industries which are running in the cities, right? So all will be utilizing the conventional or the crude oil resources. So this again, it's the oil consumption in the developing world, right? So you can see then means per day how it is increasing very well, right? So that's what. So if you just consider certain specific areas or the continents as a whole, then you can see or certain like Middle East, it's still going on well and fine, right? Africa, you do know what is the economic condition in Africa, but yes, Asia is very much at the top. So Asia is doing well in the sense of oil consumption. So it's not a good thing to brag about, but developing Asia nations, the developing nations, they are doing well. And these are the potential candidates which are leading to a massive pollution. All right. So now these nations will be blamed. Although the other developed nations they have given their share of pollution. So obviously because of them itself, there has been depletion of the ozone layer. There might have been hole in the ozone layer also, right? But now the blame will be completely centered towards the developing nations. So it's like as if I have done my part, I have made my own house, I am done satisfying my needs. Now I won't allow the other person to do so. Why? Because if both the persons are on the same page, then again it will become tough for the other guy, right? So it's better to stay at the top. It's better to stay at the top and let the others fight among each other at the bottom. Right? So this we have already discussed the crude consumption. So government or markets, who will be the deciding factor? Now this depends since it's a fluctuating business, since it's a fluctuating sector that we're talking about here. So what happens is crisis exists. You do know that at certain point of time the crude oil price fell to, it means it came to $0, right? So okay, fine, $10 was okay, fine, acceptable, but $0. So that means it was what? It was something which the companies would be like they would be feeling like throwing it just like that, just like we used to waste water, right? So the companies or the countries who were producing the oil and gas, they thought about just to throw the oil and the crude oil and the natural gas just like that, right? So that's what, shortages do occur, crisis does exist, yes, and then again there's recessions, obviously, time and again. So the crisis they exist not only in this crude oil supply but also in the supply of refined products. Yes, so that means you have to take both these sides. So if this is the seesaw that you're talking about, so here what you have is the upstream sector, and here what you have is the downstream sector, that is the refining sector and the exploration in the production sector, right? So definitely there has to be a balance. Yes, means the upstream sector has to furnish the exact amount or the required quantity of the product so that the downstream sector is able to refine it and then give it to the nations. So that's one. So crisis has to be means checked, right? So that's what you see means. So one can have adequate crude oil in it, all right, but there can be an inadequate product supply. Like say suppose let's talk about Saudi Arabia. So it's just a hypothesis that I'm just putting up. So Saudi Arabia is having a very good reserves of oil in it, but in the same case, it is not able to supply the produced goods or the various products of petroleum. So that's where the complication again arises, right? So in the midst of all these confusions, then what happened was definitely there were geopolitics that started arising, right? So just to promote certain monopoly, so what happened was USA they started preferring the oil from Canada, from Mexico, and from North Sea. And what they did was they also promoted their crude oils. And at the same time, what they tried to do is they tried to demotivate the nations who were contributing largely towards the oil and gas. Like Venezuela is one, Saudi Arabia is one, Iran is one, Kuwait, Qatar, UAE. You can see the numbers, right? You can see the numbers. So what this nations thought was that means since we are having a very huge reserves of oil and gas, so definitely by forming a cartel or by forming a group or a nexus, definitely they can control the oil and gas trade, right? So what they did was back in 1960, what they did was they formed the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries or OPEC, right? And this was being founded by Venezuela, the Republic of Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia. That means this nation, this one, this one, this one, this one. All right. So all these nations. But then again, it backfired. The plan backfired. Right? So means OPEC they thought they had the intention of forming up a monopoly, but that failed, right? But then again, all right. So it's not only OPEC, but then again there are some other darker sides of the crude oil business, all right, which have led to the downfall of the crude oil industry as well as downfall of many economies also, right? So if you talk about Cold War, so even in the times of Cold War as well, the crude oil business was severely affected, right? So now also if you talk about the economic condition of Venezuela, so here also Venezuela's the economy is coming down and down, it's crashing down, right? Because it all relied upon the crude oil's business. But then again, certain groups of benefactors, what they are doing is they are implanting certain agents of chaos, right? Because of which there are certain civil unrest, and this civil unrest, what it calls for is it calls for a change in the regime, right? So definitely the prime minister or the president, whosoever heads the nation, they are being ousted, right? Or they are being changed, and later on what comes in return is certain obligations to a certain group of nations based on which they become their slaves. And then again the same thing happens because of the certain favors that a certain group of nations have done. So definitely they will be always in debt to them, right? So earlier also it was the same thing, like you had the crude oil but you were not able to sell it. But now also what has happened was despite of the new government that has come up in any particular nation, and because of the favors that some other sets of nations have done to that particular nation, now what will happen is the crude oil will be directly supplied or it will be provided in form of certain repayment, right? In form of certain repayments. So a lot many complications are there. So that's what means we have to understand, and we can only understand when we start exploring this various possibilities. Like means how possibly a certain situation might have occurred, right? Like what have led to the Gulf War. Yes, what have led to the war between Israel and Palestine, I suppose. So we have to explore all the possibilities, right? Now, similarly, tensions also arises. It's still going on. The confusions are still going on in the European market as well, whereby Russia is having a very means Russia is not having a problem, but the other nations are having a problem with Russia's activity or attitude towards Ukraine. Right? They have already annexed Crimea in 2014. Right? So now Russia they want to bring Ukraine under the knees. All right, they want to bow down. But Ukraine at the same time, it is being pumped up with inspiration and with support from other nations. So based on which Ukraine is still standing tall, right? So now what Russia thinks is they plan on diverting the certain gas pipelines by which they try to cripple the economy of Ukraine. They are trying to cripple the energy supply to Ukraine. So that's why you see that there are certain gas pipelines which are aimed at supplying gas to the European market, but by by bypassing Ukraine. All right, and Russia is in this belief or they are in this intention to occupy this particular areas or the entire Ukraine. If I say the entire Ukraine, that won't be wrong. All right, so based on which they will be having the supremacy in this European market as well. Then we have certain places to which the oil and gas tankers they used to travel. All right, even there also the supremacy arises. All right. So even there are certain issues which might be affecting the entire global oil and gas market. So maybe if suppose if you're talking about this famous Strait of Hormuz, or if we just talk about the Strait of Malacca, all right. So if there are lot many vessels, say suppose 100 vessels are going in a line, and all these 100 vessels are carrying crude oil. Say suppose this crude oil is being carried to, let's say, USA itself. Now, what if while coming because of the pirate activities or because of certain geopolitical incidents, just like we have seen in the past, that certain nations' missiles have hit down a civilian plane, or they have hit or they have fired missiles on certain civilian tankers. Yes. So, what if out of this 100 tankers, maybe 20 tankers has been bombed down? All right. So they have been bombed, or they have been sabotaged, or they have been held ransom. So definitely that will bring down the market conditions, that will bring down the economic conditions of the US, right? So that's why these particular places are called the choke points. That is the places through which the vessels or the different source of transportation of crude oil and natural gas passes through. Right? So these are few of the newspaper cuttings, which was way back in 2020. So it's almost been a year when US and Iran used to have a series of tensions. Yes, so that time it was being ruled by the Republicans, right? And we did had a different regime back then in Iran. So because of that, so there were lot many tensions. So many predicted that this might again lead to a third world war. So now and often what happens is anytime there are certain issues. So what happens is people just come to a conclusion that what if there might be another world war coming up, right? Now, if we talk about this Strait of Hormuz, so this Strait of Hormuz is this particular part of area that we're talking about. So that means this is a narrow area here, which is adjoining Iran as well as UAE, right? So here is certain terrorism activity starts taking place, then definitely the oil and gas market will be crashing down. Why? Because Iran will be losing a major share from here, right? And there might be a such that UAE might be affected. Yes. So vessels might not be able to go out into the open waters from this particular place. Why? Because it will be all blocked. Or there might be certain embargo that might be imposed upon. Right? So neither ships can enter into the European market or sorry to the Iranian market or to the Iranian coasts, or nor ships can move out from here. And you can see the traffic here. Right? You can see the traffic here. So if you just compare the Suez Canal in here, yes, and you just compare with the traffic activity in the Strait of Hormuz, then you can well understand. Means how crucial this particular piece of area is for the entire world. And that's why all the nations all together, even though there are certain tensions arising, all the nations they try to sort it out diplomatically. Right? For example, India as well. So India is having lot many issues from Pakistan and China combined, right? So what they have done is they have built a port in Iran, which was the Chabahar port, all right, and to counter China and Pakistan's efforts of building this border port, right? So now what will happen is India can at least rely on Iran. That means from this Chabahar port, even Afghanistan might be beneficial. So Afghanistan, instead of passing through Pakistan and then entering into India, based on which the custom taxes might be increased or it might go up. So now since Afghanistan, because of certain diplomatic relations, what will happen is they can easily send their goods via Iran, and from this particular port they can come into India or maybe to Oman as well or maybe to UAE as well. Right? So there are a lot many means complicated scenarios. So it's like in a way it's a simulation that we are still into. Right? So it's a simulation, but it's a real life simulation actually. So it's not a trial and error. That means you try to build relation with Iran and try to break off with China or with Afghanistan. Then let's see what happens. No. Yes. So after critical thinking, it's only then what happens is we can then move ahead. Right. So that's what you see means demographics of the new oil demand, because you see means there are a lot many supreme leaders now, be it USA, Iran, Russia, China, and the royal family of Saudi Arabia. Right. So it is indeed means we can say that there is a threat to the oil and gas industry. But then again, we have Saudi Aramco who is flourishing enough. Yes, just today we had the annual general meeting of Reliance Industries Limited, and a person from Saudi Aramco has been inducted into the board of Reliance Industries Limited. So that means you see, means oil and gas industry is still blooming, but at the same time, on a parallel track, what is happening is this political events are changing the mindsets. They are changing the, they are bringing up a chaotic mindsets in everyone's mind, right? So if suppose if we see means if suppose there is instability in Middle East, suppose, right? So definitely that is right. But then again, finally, this particular terrorist group has been neutralized, has been brought down, right? But then again, we do knew means how they survive. The ISIS tried to capture the oil fields from which they used to sell the crude oil and they used to get the money, and from those money they used to sanction, they used to sponsor their activities. Yes. So that's what you see. Like if you say that means if suppose USA disengages itself from the Middle East, then definitely Russia is no longer that particular Russia or the Soviet Union who was invading nations. So definitely Russia has changed its objectives. It has changed its mindsets. So if we say that if USA disengages itself means if USA backs out, just like it has backed out from Afghanistan few days back, right? So the NATO meeting was being convened and the US troops had backed out. Yes. So now if USA does the same in the entire Middle East, then definitely that would leave either China or India to establish power in that particular area. Because both these nations, China and India, they are now considered to be the potential candidates to lead this world today or to lead the world in the coming few years. But then again, they won't be able to do so. Why? Because they are not strong diplomatically, nor economically, nor militarily. They are capable. Yes. Why? Because they're just building upon. Right? So that's what. Then again, we are in need of new sources of oil, but then again, we are not able to find new resources or new fields are not being discovered. Even though there are some discoveries, then there are some small fields that are being discovered, or there are some gas fields that are being discovered, right? So neither small fields will be increasing our revenues, nor the gas fields will be increasing our revenue, because gases can be produced from the crude oil refining as well, right? We have the marginal fields, which are in such a way that means they can't have the normal setup of oil and gas productions because they are logistically very much challenging. So this is the reason why these marginal fields are also a problem. So that means you see we are having the oil and gas reserves, but because of certain constraints like the small fields where the accumulations are very less, very few, very minute. Yes, so that means it's just like if you invest 10 rupees into a certain item, then hardly you'll be getting zero point 0.1 as the return. So definitely this is certainly you won't be investing in, even though you'll be getting guaranteed return of zero point 0.1, right? So that's the problem here now. So that's the problem here. But then again, at the same time, we know that in the developing nations, the demand is increasing, right? The demand is increasing. Then again, this calls for a greater supply as well. Then again, to ensure supply, we have to ensure that everything is in a peaceful mindset, right? So that's what means. Why can't the market do the job? Means why can't the companies control this certain uncertainties that are coming up, that are popping up? Because the governments, they're not allowing to do so. All right, because we know that means whichever nation it might be, although the laws might be different in certain ways, although the regulations might be different in certain ways, the governments they won't be allowing the companies to take control of the market. Rather, the government will be taking control. They do have the control in the market. So what if today Saudi Arabia, what if today they ban or they means they completely disqualify Schlumberger, Shell, Total, then ExxonMobil, all right, and it only promotes, say suppose Saudi Aramco, then say suppose ADNOC of Abu Dhabi, only these two companies. That won't be the case, you see, means they won't be doing it because they know by promoting this, then definitely there will be a fall of this oil and gas market in the Saudi Arabia. Why? Because maybe Schlumberger it is capable of providing not many services like we have the logging services or the engineering services, right? So Shell is having the refineries as well, right? ExxonMobil is another good, it's very much good in providing services. So if these companies are being kicked out, then definitely the survival of Saudi Aramco, the survival of ADNOC might be at stake tomorrow, right? So definitely means the companies are not controlling the market; it's rather the government. Okay? So that's what. And another thing is this has led to the price volatility. All right. So means today it's $70 per barrel. So the last time when I checked today it was around like $70 per barrel. So tomorrow means you may never know. It might come to some $100 per barrel. Means definitely it won't happen tomorrow itself. But I'm just trying to put up. I'm just trying to put up this scenario. So it might be going to $100 per barrel, but it can also happen in such a way that it can come crashing down to $10 per barrel. Yes. So that's what. And this again, this price volatility, it calls for political intervention as well. In India itself, we might have seen when the previous government was ruling, the previous opposition, who is the current government now, they were shouting about the fuel rises or the price hikes. But when the current government, that means the previous opposition is currently the government, it is doing the same thing or the situation the same. Now they are trying to frame all those activities, this opposition as bollocks, right? So this also it's a very vicious circle that we are. Right? Okay, so I hope